Welcome back to the Freedom Podcast. Hello, everybody. It's been great to have had a few weeks off, but we're back with more. We've had the charge going on the last few weeks. We've been traveling internationally, but now we get to gather again. And actually, we've got G and Dave with us. So this
back
is
with
a
the boys.
special episode. We were just reflecting that this is the last time we did this was Rocky Mountains, wasn't it?
Yeah, that's what it's like these days is, we just get these little moments in the Rockies. Now we're on this podcast together. Miss your team, but great reports what's going over there in the US. Excited for everything that's happening. But we do miss you here in the UK.
Come on. Yeah, it's been an amazing season here in Raleigh. And we just had the Horde as well, didn't we, Dave? And we had a brilliant time.
Epic.
At the Horde. We had a few baptisms. We took a giant beach ball. It was an 8-foot monster beach ball that I found actually online because I saw this in like a viral review, and I thought that sounds quite fun. So I want to share this review now. This is like an insight into my mind. So I saw this and it says, a fun way to ruin a weekend and blow $100. We took this ball to the beach. So if you haven't seen our massive beach ball on Instagram, you should check it out. We took this ball to the beach. So this is a 8-foot, larger than a man beach ball, and I thought it'd be fun to take to the Horde. And after close to 2 hours to pump it up, we pushed it around for about 10 fun-filled minutes. That was when the wind picked it up and sent it hurtling down the beach at about 40 knots. It destroyed everything in its path. Children screamed in terror at the giant inflatable monster that crushed their sandcastles. Grown men were knocked down trying to save their families. The faster we chased it, the faster it rolled. It was like it was mocking us. Eventually, we had to stop running after it because its path of injury and destruction was going to cost us a fortune in legal fees. Rumor has it that it can still be seen stalking innocent families on the Florida Panhandle. We lost it in South Carolina, so there's something to be said about its durability. So I read this review and I thought, that sounds like the ball for me. And so we took it to the Horde. And we set up 2 goals, one each end, and it was like we got 2 like teams of men. There's about 10 on each side, and you're all trying to get this huge beach ball. And it was actually, the wind kept taking it was quite heavy,
so hard,
and it's like you can get it and send it into the other goal, and it was absolutely impossible to get to a goal. So it ended up being a kind of a pointless game. But we decided at the end, someone came up with the idea. I don't know, Dave, was this you? Because this sounds like something you would do.
Might have been me and Will. Yes, it was me.
Why don't we put the ball in the middle and then we get one man to run from one side and one man to run from the other side at full speed and see what happens? And so then we started pitting men against each other where they would run into the ball at full speed and the ball would kind of ping pong between them and bowl them over. And it was absolutely hilarious.
There was some serious whiplash. It was like whoever actually got the second hit came off better, didn't they? Definitely. And the person who got the first hit, the ball came back and smashed. Oh, it was brilliant.
Yeah, you were getting double the speed back at you, basically.
Yeah,
it was a great time, but also we had a powerful time. It wasn't just carnage with our beach ball. We had an amazing time. Like, God moved powerfully. We had a first session on the opening night, and people were sobbing. Like, God was really moving powerfully in the room. There was a lot of healing. God moved in amazing ways. If you haven't been to the Horde as a man, as a Christian man, you should come and join us next year, whether it's UK, whether it's the US, whether it's one of our churches and our other locations. It is amazing. And thanks to G and H, you brought words to the Horde. It was so good.
Yeah, there's nothing like a bunch of men gathering together, going away for a couple of days. It starts at a high level straight away because there's like an expectation, and it's just fantastic seeing a whole different age group of men gathering together, hungry for God to move. And every time we do it, God moves. It's an amazing thing, the Horde.
Come on. even if there are a few injuries along the way.
There's always injuries.
Oh my gosh.
Gotta have some.
Yes. So we wanted to cover today. We're going to have a chat, and the reason I got G and Dave here today is we want to talk a bit about the future of Freedom Church, because as we had our annual leadership gathering, the Charge in the UK, we downloaded to our leaders what God has been speaking to us about, and we alluded to some of this in the Rocky Mountains podcast, because that's when we were having the conversation almost 6 months ago now, talking about what the future is, what God was saying to us. And so we're going to share a bit of that with the wider church today, because we can't send out this content. It's not relevant to everyone to hear on a Sunday. For some people, it will be subtle changes. For other people, they'll notice something big's happened. And we wanted to share a little bit with that, about that on the podcast today. So I wonder, Dave, if you could kick us off a bit with talking a little bit about this idea of crowd and core.
Yeah, so I mean, one of the things that we love within Freedom is we obviously love going all in, being heart and soul, being full on for God, for the church, for the mission. And we've got an amazing core. You know, you think about the different cave events we've got, and I always remember, you always kind of try and make the ask hard. You know, it's never easy when it comes to kind of the church planting call or the mission call, and yet our crazy core step up straight from day one. You know, we have incredible responses. Yeah. But over the last couple of months, we've, and I'm sure we'll go into this, we've come into a number of different conversations where one of the things God's, I guess, challenged and inspired us around is actually, if we're going to reach the world in the way that we feel burdened to, we've actually got to grow our capacity to connect with people who aren't quite at that point. So actually growing our crowd, growing our ability to connect with people that aren't quite at kind of cave intensity just yet. I don't know if Josh, you might share some of this, but when you look at the teachings of Jesus, you know, we talk about the disciples, we talk about the people who were those sold out core people, but they didn't actually start there. They started often on the edges, in the crowd. And the things that Jesus said to those people at that time was often actually quite different to what he said to them, you know, as they went on that journey. I've been reading through the Gospel of John recently, and I just finished it yesterday, and it still blows my mind how the disciples 3 years into their journey are still figuring it out. Even Jesus says to them in like chapter 19 or 20, he's like, do you get yet that I'm the Messiah? Do you get it yet? You know, you got these guys, they watched him raise Lazarus from the dead, feed the 5,000. But what we see through the journeys of the disciples is we see Jesus taking crowd to core, and then core, you know, go and reach the crowd again. And so we felt God challenging us as a leadership team to step into a season where we focus on building that crowd, speaking to that crowd, connecting with that crowd, so that we can actually see a greater impact to salvation, and over time see a greater core and a greater impact in and through our church.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that one of the things that over the years that we've been effective as doing is that what's one of our strengths as Freedom Church? We are good at building a core. We're good at building culture, and we've seen phenomenally sold out people. You're probably listening to this podcast right now, a lot of you, where it's like you'll do anything for the kingdom of God. You will go and give up your lives. You will carry this vision. And I think that's one of the things that we've been effective at doing over the years is building strong core where we are. But one of the things that we really felt God calling us to through this year was doing a better job of reaching the crowd. And the crowd are those that have come in that are not quite ready to be core. They're not ready to jump in and be, you know, live for a sacrifice and pick up their cross and do all these things that as Freedom Church people, we know we're called to do ultimately as Christians. But it takes a journey to get there. And so one of the things God started speaking to us about leadership team is that he wanted to grow our ability at connecting to crowd, connecting to people that are not yet there. And one of the examples we just talked about this was how Jesus calls Peter to him and he says, follow me. And he doesn't really say much about what that entails. But Dave was just talking about the book of John. And in John 21, Jesus talks to him again about what it means to follow him. And then he talks about how it's going to cost him his life. But this is 3 years later, after he's seen a lot, done a lot, been through a lot. And there's that, right, now you're ready to know the fullness of what this is going to be. Because you weren't ready to hear that 3 years ago when I first called you, because that was the beginning of your journey. And I think that there's something for all of us where we want to take people on the journey. Jesus, when he's saying these famous words about whoever wants to be my disciple must pick up their cross and follow me, it says he turns to the crowd, that there is a crowd that's following, and out of the crowd then emerge the core. And we thought, we want to grow the core of people that are more sold out for that. But to do that, you've actually got to be more effective at reaching crowd so that you can be better at seeing more core people grown and come in, and making sure that there's a place for all of our cities and communities that we're in. We don't want it to just be for those that get it immediately, but for those that also are going on a journey. And so we're really excited about what this means. But I think it also ties into something, G, that you've actually been feeling for a while now as our visionary, as our leader. You've kept coming back to consistently about there is more for us as a church. And you would envision our pastors, I want you to be thinking about doubling. I want you to think about growing, about being more effective. Do you want to just say anything about that kind of sense of like, there is more for us as a church?
Yeah, I think particularly at the start of this year, we spoke to our leaders at our leadership hub, and I think the profound thing I had from the end of last year was God was saying, you just got to get ready, double. You've got to get ready for growth. But there was this word they gave me, which was fresh blood. In fact, it's 2 words, and that was my word for 2023 was fresh blood. Get ready. I'm actually, and this is what he was saying, I'm going to bring in new blood, like basically new people that are going to follow me. They're going to pursue me, going to follow me. Get ready for the new blood and get ready to make a place for them. But also, I'm going to rejuvenate some of the blood that is out there. And I really believe that there are people that have perhaps struggled following Jesus. Perhaps they somehow got a bit lost, but there's still the call there. And I think maybe some people are listening right now to this that are thinking, yeah, I got disconnected. I'm sort of, but there's the fact you're even listening to this, I think says that God wants to speak to you.
Yeah.
And so he spoke about that new blood, about the rejuvenating of the blood that has once been sort of, I think, on fire for him. It's like, no, come on, it's not over. And this year we cast this vision and said, come on, there's something about tribes and the Freedom Nation that I want to do. And we didn't quite understand that at that point. It's like, what does that mean? We're a movement, but what's tribes and nations? And as we journeyed through this year, God started then downloading and say, do you know what? There's more. I want to do more. I want to see growth. But to see growth, you can't continue the way that you're doing it. There's got to be a new approach. And one of those, I think, a picture to describe it is you got to broaden the ramp to allow people to access, to access my church, to come in. What's the ramp of freedom like right now? It might be a little bit steep and a little bit hard to get onto. And for us to actually approach the crowd and to say, come on, there's a place for you. Come on, there are people for you. Do you know what I mean? There's purpose for you. There's something about that whole thing. And we got to make that ramp easier to approach so we can see more people come in through those doors every week. And I think this was some of the beginning of what God was saying. And then we went on that journey.
Absolutely. I think that we've got a burden as a leadership team that we just wanted to see more people saved.
Yeah.
We want to see more people come to know Jesus. Whatever we're doing around the world, we've been building our churches, we've been sending out missionaries. We want to see greater fruitfulness where people are coming to know the light that only Jesus can bring. And I think that is our heart behind all that we're doing, and all this changes that we're going to be talking about today is you want to see greater impact for more souls entering heaven. And so we want to turn this church, we want to just increase its effectiveness in just being a soul winning machine.
Yeah, when I talk about the ramp as well, Josh, perhaps just to bring clarity, that's not about watering down what we believe.
Yeah.
It's not watering down our passion or the nature that we have made Jesus Lord of our lives. And, we're not looking at like that compromise of his word. What we're saying is there are ways that we can actually broaden the access of people to come into our churches and to see the lost, see those that are sort of, disconnected, find home, find purpose. And that's the exciting thing. It is all about the more.
Definitely. And earlier this year, I actually got the opportunity to go to a conference here in the US, which is the first time I'd really been invited to anything through since our time over here in the States. And so I went along, and it was through my brother Luke, and he had invited me to go to the art conference in Alabama. And honestly, we didn't have a clue what we were going to, what it was going to be like. But there were thousands of people there, and it was an amazing time. And God really started speaking about some of these things through this conference, and we then started talking about it as a team. And we went on a journey of then reflecting on some of these principles and things that we could learn, but also apply to our church planting. And that's what we were really getting excited, because this was the week of the cave for us that I ended up going here. And I remember speaking to you guys and saying, I really feel like there's something around 72 and some of our church planting strategy that God is going to bring for us. So we started then talking. We obviously went away to the Rocky Mountains together and started saying, what does our new season look like, with perhaps some changed approaches to being more effective at being a soul winning machine by winning the crowd. And so there are some things that we're going to talk about now, some changes that we're going to make. And I'll say, before we say any of this, we've almost got, for all of our churches that are around the world, we are going to have a different timeline and journey for each one. Each one will be relatively different to where you are. So there's no set time of when some of these things will happen. In fact, it's going to be down to the local pastor. But that's probably the first thing that I think we'll come to, is this idea that we're going to move away from being campuses to churches. And you've already heard us referring to our churches like this. But one of the things that we're not going to be talking about anymore is campuses. One of the big things is that we want to say is, actually, you don't have a campus pastor anymore. This is the pastor. And there was this whole idea, wasn't there, of a change of role. So we're really excited about what this means. But as we go into this whole idea of a new era, do you want to just give us a little bit, G, about this almost local vision, language and outreach, about how we want to go from being almost global to being local?
Yeah, well, we obviously started with a vision to go global, and we did that from Hereford, and we used video, video messages. That's how we did it. So we would broadcast, which is what we do currently, broadcast into different campuses around the world that we have planted. And that's how we've done it. But it's all come really from Hereford, and there's this feeding from the central base. And we refer to this, and I taught about this at the charge, the spider and starfish model. They both look the same when you look at them from the top, but the one has a head. The spider has a head. When you cut the head off, he dies. And so it's like a central control model. But when you cut a starfish leg off, it regrows. Not only that, he can actually grow a whole other body. Yeah. And there is this thing about adaptation, about, every time you think you might be able to reduce it or cut it off, it just increases. And I shared these principles at the charge, because I think this is really what's happening is we obviously built, what we've built and what we've seen has been amazing, around the world. But it really comes back to a lot of that central responsibility in Hereford to, what are we doing now? And what's our next series? And, making sure the preachers are all filmed. But what I think where we journeyed was, do you know what? For us to grow more now, the next phase, the next stage is that now we've got to release that. We've got to release it, into the US, into Asia, Southeast Asia, into Europe. We've got to release it into East Africa. We've got to release what God is doing by giving that permission and empowering our pastors to really run with a local expression, which makes sense. Because when I went to East Africa, we had one of our guys from Hereford do one of our worship songs. Fantastic. We're all used to it. So it's like, but I didn't realize how British it was until their worship guy got up and did one of our songs, but with this vibe that was African and it was local, and the guys took the roof off. And it was just those little things that God started saying, you got to release this, you got to release it and let these guys run with it. And so that's the Starfish model, really, is saying, we're not going to be dictating that from one central place in Hereford, because how can we try and be all those things to everyone? And at the same time, we're going to release our local pastors to be preaching more, taking that local expression, the expression of examples that apply to people on the ground. It's just too much to expect one person to do it based in the UK to try and have that relevance. Now, we know God's word is powerful, and we've seen salvation. We have seen that our church explode, but God's saying there's so much more. But how do you see the more? You've actually got to release what you are holding. And that's the journey that the three of us as a directional leadership team have been on. When we were in the Rockies, it was like, right, are we ready to almost let go of what we have open hands with it? And we're going to say, do you know what? We release you. Go and build, go and reach more, go and hear what God is saying. Don't always be looking to us. And that's so what this is about. That's the phase of this that we're saying it's time to release, because when we do that, you can't pinpoint whoever is in charge or in control in one sense, because it's like, no, that sort of stops over there in this area, but it pops up over here. And I think we're going to have churches that are just like, wow, they're here, they're there. They're taking place all over, just as it was in the New Testament, the way that it came under persecution, but the more persecution, it was like locally, they were just popping up. There's another church. And we're excited about what God is going to do with this model.
Absolutely. And I wonder, Dave, if you could just give us a bit on the idea of moving. And I think particularly we ramped this up during the pandemic and all that we went through with COVID, but we had a very globalized focus. So we're hearing in a lot of our churches, you might be in our church in Worcester, and you might be hearing about what's happening in Chennai, but we're now almost wanting to create more of a local focus. Do you want to just talk about that?
Yeah, I mean, it was incredible, wasn't it, through the pandemic? And I think one of the things that was such a blessing to us as a global and local church is that we had that. And I think I've spoken to a lot of pastors here. I think a lot of churches really struggled through the pandemic because they didn't have that network and that support. And I'm so thankful to God for that. But the reality is that that's something that relates to the core again. When you're sort of hearing about something internal, the majority of people in Worcester aren't thinking about what's happening in Chiang Mai, Thailand, or in South Africa, in Cape Town. And though those things are great and those are brilliant, actually, if we're going to reach the core, we need to have a greater capacity to speak to where they're at, the things that they're thinking about, the things that they're concerned about, or passionate about. And so releasing our ability to be more localized in that is actually, again, it's a very strategic move to be able to reach the crowd, because actually the way that Jesus reached the crowd is that he spoke to them about exactly where they were at, what they were thinking, what was on their mind culturally in that moment. And so we're going to shift particularly on our Sundays, the sort of the focus away, not so much away from in entirety, but lessening that significantly so that we can speak into locally. One of the pieces of thinking that we've kind of, I guess, come up alongside in this through this process is that most people in our local cities don't really care about our church. And, to a core person, it's like, oh, come on, this is the greatest thing in the world. Jesus has changed my life. The local church is the answer to, all of those.
Want to hear about what's going on the other side of the world because they love our church.
Exactly. And that's a great thing. And we're not going to lose that in its entirety. But this statement, it says, most people don't really care about your church, but they do care about themselves and they care about changing their lives. And we know that there's compromise in that. We talk about being a consumer or consumed. But actually what we're going to do is in our language, move to being able to speak into people from where they're at more than from where we're at, particularly in those corporate areas. And I think that localization is going to give us an amazing ability to do that. But also finally, not only is it going to give us an ability to reach a greater reach the crowd, but actually release our pastors. We got some incredible pastors with amazing vision and incredible gifting. And we want to see that multiplication. I know that we've all been unbelievably blessed by being, under the video teaching and it'll be different. But also we got some amazingly gifted leaders in our church, and we want to raise up that. I think even last year we started having more local voices coming through, and we just saw such amazing fruit from that. We want to increase it.
Yeah, our church, we want our churches, say in Cheltenham, our church in Cheltenham, we want our church in Cheltenham to be more about Cheltenham and sold out for Cheltenham and talking about Cheltenham than they've ever been. And there's something about the global thing that God did when we first started planting churches that I could tell you almost every person that was coming into our church in Uganda and who was the worship leader and who was starting to do the academy, because we were so bought in and sold out and connected to everything that was happening globally. It was fueling us and driving us on. But as obviously the church has expanded, that's become impossible to do. And actually, one of the things that we want to pivot and switch to is making sure that actually our church Sunday experiences, when people are coming in for the first time to a service, is that it's about where they're at. And we got this whole idea. You might have seen what we're doing in Raleigh. You might have seen some of our social media posts about your place, your people, your purpose. And the whole idea is that we're not talking about us and what we do and our vision to reach the world. We're talking about what they need. That they need a place to be, that people need community, and this is where you can find it. And that really importantly, that every single person is looking for their life to matter. And this is where you will discover what that purpose is. And so we're offering something to that person that's coming in for the first time that they were already looking for, whether that was on the surface or whether that was deep within them. Every person is looking for purpose. And so we're trying to pivot our church to be much more around what people are looking for rather than just about what we do as a church and what we're passionate about. So as G and Dave have talked about, there's a number of areas that this kind of applies to, whether it's the language that we're doing, the outreach that we're focused on, but also there's some things around decentralization. We're not going to have in the same way that we have in the past, a central team. A lot of our team that would have been classed as central were coming out of Hereford. We've got a Hereford team and our Hereford church, and just massive honor to our church in Hereford that have supported and funded
huge
and served the rest of our global church. But also one of the things that we're really passionate about as a team is that we want to see our church in Hereford reach Hereford more effectively than they have in its entire history, and almost giving them the release and scope to say, you don't have to carry the rest of Freedom Church. Actually, you can focus on the city of Hereford. I know there's a lot of excitement right now, isn't there, G, for that and what that's going to mean in the coming months.
Yeah, we just shared with our leaders yesterday evening about some of this that we're talking about, and also about applying some of that strategy. And yeah, that room was on fire because they want to reach their neighbors, their work colleagues, their friends. And this will, it will just empower them to be able to focus on that more and set them up in such, an exciting way. So yeah, we're all fired up for that here, and you just watch out for this next 12 months, what's going to happen in Hereford.
Come on. Yeah, so one of the ways that's going to then affect things is that there will be local interpretation of vision. Just an example of this: a few years ago, we talked about, as a leadership team, what's our heart for zeal and our young people, and we came up with a vision and a plan, and we said, hey, we shared it with our pastors, and they started to roll that out across some of the churches that could do it at that time. And the difference now will be, it's down to our local pastor in Rotterdam to say, this is how we're going to reach young people. This is what's relevant. This is what's going to be effective in our culture. So that would be some of the changes of the way it works. So we've got this shift happening from campus pastor to pastor. And one of the things I just wanted to mention in regard to this is that we have got a heart for all of our pastors to be entering into full-time ministry at some point. And I think that this is not something that we've had a massive emphasis or focus on over the last years, because we have had a model where you can get the video teaching, and you can almost rely upon the global structure of what we have as Freedom Church. But as we have greater emphasis locally, we need local shepherds. We need local leaders and teachers and pastors to be raised up. And so we've been just getting a heart as a leadership team saying, we want to see every single one of our pastors being able to enter in and do this full time. And some of our pastors are working as teachers. Some of them are running their own businesses. Some of them are working for other companies, and some of them are working part-time and then working sometime for the church. There's a whole mix of different things. And again, our pastors, a lot of you won't know the sacrifices they've made or the things that they've done to make church happen week in, week out. But as we enter into this new era, we want to see a shift happen where actually our churches, wherever they are, they can support and really make a way for our pastor to be able to be employed. And so, and maybe you're listening to this as a business leader, and you might have a heart for your pastor to be going into full-time ministry, to be able to leave their job. Maybe God is calling you to increase your giving, to be able to come and contribute something greater as they step out in faith, that you're with them in faith within that. And I just wanted to say that that's part of our vision. That's one of the changes that I think is going to happen in this coming season at some point.
Yeah, part of that will be the local church takes on that responsibility and goes on the journey of faith for it, because it's we haven't got churches with lots of money. We tend to use what we have to reach lost people. But I think we were very challenged about, we need to take care of our pastors and also cast that vision of, we want to reach more people. But if you're going to reach more people, you need to release those that are shepherds and leading us in the way. And I think for some of us, we want to grow. We'd like to grow the church so it's big enough, and then we've got money to say, hey, let's employ the pastor. But it doesn't really work that way. There is something about stepping out of faith and saying, this is what we're believing for. We're going to release you so that we can build. And that might be for some locations in phases. It might, there might be different periods of time. But I think the big challenge is, what faith do you have for your town or your city? Do you want to see it double right now? If you want to see it double, part of that equation is, okay, well, what faith do we have to see our pastors released in a greater measure? And how am I going to play a part in it?
Brilliant.
Because this is about our involvement.
Come on. So good. And we're going to just come back to an idea that you shared earlier, G, which was about a freedom nation. You talked about this word that you'd had at the beginning of the year. And you might be listening to this going, hold on, I don't want things to change. And I love the way the way they are. Well, this is freedom. This is what we do. We change, we move forward, and things shift. And if you've been a part of the church for any amount of time, you're probably used to it by now. But there is something about, we're going to shift into what God's called us to next. But one of the big sacrifices or things that I think a lot of people will miss is having you, particularly G, as our senior pastor, speaking on a regular basis on screen, because you are a gifted and anointed teacher. You've obviously got so much experience and wisdom that you bring. I want to say that our pastors who are going to be speaking locally are going to be growing in that. I don't think we can put an expectation that our pastors are all of a sudden going to be, being able to match some of that you have had years and years of experience in. But we know that if we release them now, in the years to come, that a lot of them would have grown in their ability to teach and grow in their gifting. But as for people locally where they are, there is going to be this opportunity where you can connect in on the Freedom Church Media app, where you can still watch messages like that, and still kind of get your connection there. But there's going to be other ways that we're going to stay connected as Freedom Nation. So what makes us still Freedom if we're not going to be having almost G on screen, or our teaching team, our leadership team teaching? What is that going to mean for what's going to then fix us to be Freedom? What still binds us together? So Dave, do you want to just give us a couple of thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, I mean, this is one of the really exciting things about this and the potential in it. So the first thing that's, not shifting is our vision. All of our Freedom locations around the world are going to be about connecting people to a life-changing relationship with Jesus. And we're going to be keeping that kind of front and center as we go forward. The next thing that is going to be absolutely massive is our culture. So, we're talking about shifting some of the systems and some of the ways that we operate. And those things are significant, particularly around like the teaching, local teaching. But if I look back on the last 15 years, the thing that I think has been the special sauce in it all has been the culture. We've had, I don't know how many different iterations of how we build church over the last 15 years, but the culture is going to remain the same. So in every location, in every church, we're going to be pushing toward that. And we're obviously going to be discovering new ways to take the crowd to core and the core to that culture as well. And we're going to learn on that journey. So we're going to have the same vision, have the same culture, but we talk about Freedom being a family, and family ain't family unless you get together certain times of the year. And so we're going to all still be keeping the cave, Dauntless, the Horde, the Charge. These are going to be our sort of four really, really key connection points through the year and through the years. So, for example, we'll continue to do the cave around the world, but we'll continue to encourage people to go and visit, the cave. Let's say, I'm thinking about our church here in America. I can't wait to get a little busload of us over to the UK cave sometime in the years to come, because that's going to be how people are going to rub up shoulders against each other and build relationship. And I think that's the final thing I would say, is that, as we decentralize, and there's a different way that we're going to, do preaching and even some of the operational organizational stuff. Ultimately, the big thing, and, in the 15, 16 years of being under G&H's leadership, the big thing that matters the most to us is relationship. And so,
Definitely.
Those events they're not just going to be like, oh, well, that's the thing we go to. It's actually, no, that's the family gathering where we catch up, where we hang out, where we build relationship. And so, I think it's still going to be a lot of interaction on the social. Obviously, the podcast is proven to be an amazing hit with people around our church. We're going to continue to have these things that will spill out across our locations, and they're going to become more and more key in the years to come as we have a localized vision. Those touch points together in the year are going to be massively important.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that one of the things is we're still planning on doing series together where we can come and still receive the same themes through the year that God is speaking, and there'll be local interpretation of that is made relevant by our pastors who are speaking live. But as I said, there's going to be a time to do this. A lot of our pastors are not going to be jumping into this next week, and so just encourage you, stick with everything that we're doing for now. It's still anointed, and it's still going to be powerful, all the way that we have been doing things. But as time passes, there will be a shift that comes. Go on, G.
Yeah, I was going to perhaps mention Firestarters, because I'm sure there might be some people thinking we have people gathering in homes. That might be sort of smallish numbers of people that gather and watch online. We produce an online church every week, and it's an incredible resource that we do, and that brings in our fire starters who might have started something in their community. It could be in university, it could be wherever that is. We still will be operating that as well. It's a different strategy. We're not going to be saying we're not doing that, because we have people around the world that tap into that and they see us as their church, and there still will be that online church. It might have different speakers within it, but we're still going to have that online church where people could connect. Maybe they're in the forces somewhere and they're away and they're able to connect into that. So we're still going to provide that element. We're not saying, that that's going to finish, but what we're doing is we're adding and we're releasing into this whole new strategy about building church, releasing our guys to go in a bigger way. Also, you mentioned this about our culture, Dave, but our DNA in Freedom Church, that's what many of our guys would understand as that those are our values. It creates culture. And our DNA, that's what we're going to be sticking to. That's what we're bought into. That's like what makes us who we are. And when I talked about the starfish and the spider, it was the Apaches who were in North America. When the Spanish tried to conquer them, they went up there and tried to wipe them out. But every time they killed one bunch, another chief sort of sat up and says, "No, I'm a chief over here." And then another one did. And what was the common denominator? They were all separate tribes, but they were the nation of the Apaches. And this is a similar picture to what we're really building, is that what bound them was common values. They had certain values and culture, their traditions, their right to be independent that bound them, and they were willing to die for that. And so some people might be a bit concerned, are we going to be as close as a church? Are we going to, is it going to be the same freedom? But we believe that as we've built that core with a very strong culture through our DNA that's relational, it's like a heart thing, it's relational, is that although we might be saying, hey, there's the tribe over here and a tribe in this direction, do you know what? We have a commonality between us when we come together. And we believe in that, and that is strong. And that's what made the Apaches such a force. And, we are, again, expectant and excited for how that is just going to grow and multiply when we hold those values and put them in a great place.
Definitely.
It's great.
And I think that one of the things for us as well is that we, as Freedom churches and for our pastors, they will still be accountable and ultimately led by our directional leadership team and our senior pastors. And so that will still be the kind of structure of the way that things will still be led by our team. So,
yeah, our biblical stand point, our position of doctrine, etc., that will be the same for all of our nation, our Freedom Nation, our tribes. It's not going to be, hey, we're in this part of the world in Asia and we just want to change some of that. No, that's not going to happen. There's that accountability. There'll be the strong relational connections with our leaders. So just wanted to reassure people that's not changing. It's not going to be a bit of a compromise. We're in this together.
Okay. So just before we finish, a couple of things I just want to say, which is, Dave, you've actually you've run into a bit of a situation in Charleston. So you're actually getting ready, aren't you, to open your church, you and Saz, over in Charleston. But do you want to say a little bit about that situation?
Yeah, so I mean, we're very, very excited about what's happening here, but we've had a few questions coming in because people have seen a little bit of an evolution on social. We had a few messages saying, "Have you left Free?" No, we haven't, people. We are still part of the family. Can't get rid of us that easily. But basically, Josh mentioned earlier that went to a conference with ARC, which is the Association of Related Churches, founded in about 23 years ago, church planting movement. And a lot of some of the thinking and some of this journey we've been on has been inspired by our interactions there. And Saz and I are actually now, we're planting as a location in partnership with them. And we are as a church in partnership with them, which we're really excited about. But that happened about 4 or 5 months ago. We got this little office building on the ground. We were ready to just plant as we had. But obviously that relationship came in and we started to think differently than we had been. But also we started to have a bit of a confusion, a bit of an issue, because there's another Freedom Church here, in the greater Charleston area. And when we moved here, we knew that, and we understood that. But, we didn't think that would necessarily be a huge complication. And honestly, they as a church have been great. They're about half an hour away. They've been very kind to us as we've been here. But what we found was that actually, as we're talking to people, it was this layer of confusion. We're having to explain, we're not them and they're not us. We got our kind of Google posting right up to the top, and Saz was getting 3, 4, 5 phone calls a week asking about their amazing ministries. And she had to say, hey, they're a great church, but it's not us. Can you go and connect? I had one guy rock up to the office one Sunday morning and say, you're planting here. And I was like, have I met you? And so it was just a real time, I guess, stepping stone we didn't need in order to more easily connect with the crowd. And as we talk with ARC, one of their principles is don't plant a bush under an oak tree. In other words, give yourself some room to grow. And as a leadership team, we came around the table and said, could we plant with a different name? Could we have a baby, a tribe within the Freedom Nation with a different name? And it's interesting because we've actually talked about this, haven't we, for a while. It's come up a few places, but it's now, as we're stepping into this new era of church planting, God's led us to it. So we have shifted, and we are going to be planting Courageous Church, part of the Freedom Nation family of churches. We're pumped for it. It was a bit of a journey to get to that, because it's a massive feel a real weight of responsibility. But I think one of the things I just want to say is that, part of that name really did come out of us as a team and our senior pastors. Saz and I, it sort of wasn't us going off on our own. It's something that we said, okay, this is a significant step for us. But what's been amazing is the response we've had to that has been wild. It's been absolutely wild. We met with a lady on Friday, had coffee with her because she can't come to one of our interest meetings. And she's actually signed up to be part of our launch team, which is incredible. And I asked her, I said, what attracted you? What did you notice? She said, when I saw Courageous, that was it. And we really believe a broken world needs a courageous church. And, from the sixth graders or the year sevens for the Brits, starting high school and middle school, through to the families going through, challenging medical situations, through to the students starting college, through to the guy that knows he needs to share something with his wife. We need courage to step into that life-changing relationship with Jesus. And we believe that this city is full of everyday heroes waiting to be awoken with that bravery of Christ. And I'll just finish up, when I look, as I've started to think about it, and I think about Joshua, Gideon, David, Rahab, Ruth, Peter, Paul, Mary, Martha, what marked their life is that they found the courage of Christ. And through the courage of Christ, their life then marked history. So we are a Freedom Nation church. We are still part of the family. But we're going to be running with this first flag of one of the tribes of our nation into the city of Charleston. And we can't wait.
That's it. Come on, you're still gonna have the lion on you, aren't you, Dave? But
exactly,
the Lion of Judah. But there is something around this expression that was like, did you know what? This is the wisest and best move. And I think as well, even the way God's been speaking into it already, it's been so encouraging. So, guys, I just want to finish up with just sharing that even as we've started applying these principles, obviously we've been sharing on the podcast, we're launching the church, and we've been applying a lot of this, and we've been on this journey, and we have seen in the last 5 weeks 52 salvations.
Come on.
Here in Raleigh,
Josh,
which
amazing.
is just blown us away with seeing people saved at every service that we've done every week. So 2 services each week. We did 3 on the first, and every single time we've been seeing people get saved. I've never seen anything like it, and I'm so encouraged. And we've been reaching a lot of broken people. You know, a lot of people who are coming, like Jesus said, I didn't come for the healthy, I came for the sick. Like that's who needs a doctor. And that's where we've been taking the gospel to, is people who really need hope, people who need freedom and the light that Jesus brings. So I just want to finish that with, like, that is just a taster of what Freedom Church, I believe, is going to see around the world in the coming years. That we're going to see people getting saved in radical ways, reaching broken communities. I think we're going to be more fruitful than ever. And I think we as a leadership team are so excited to see our pastors step into this new season of anointing and calling, and seeing the cities that we're in and the cities that we'll go to impacted like never before.
Yeah, Josh, I believe that we're in a season of harvest right now.
Let's go.
I think that, you know, you go through season, done this for sort of decades, but there is a real sense. We're seeing this in Hereford, but we're seeing other places where people are searching. People are walking through our doors by themselves, which takes a lot of guts. No church background, just saying, in one sense, like, I feel called to be here. Something made me walk in today, and I'm searching. I think it's to do with Jesus. I've started reading the Bible. That is happening across our locations, and God is definitely moving. There is a harvest that is coming. But one of the things that God spoke to us, you know, around this strategy really was, you can't do this alone. He said, you've got to collaborate. And you remember the scripture where Jesus shouts out and he says, put your nets out, put them out on the other side. And they make this big catch. So what we're doing is we're putting our nets on the other side. We're doing things differently. There's a different way for a different season that we're in. And as we do that, we're going to see an amazing catch, but we can't do that by ourselves. And that's why we have, got involved, and we've said what the ARC strategy, the strategy that church planting organization has. Do you know what? We need a partner. We need to collaborate, because God's given us bigger nets. And this is about the bigger nets, but partnering is an amazing thing. And I think that's in our hearts to say, do you know what? It's not about our name, Freedom. If we need to be called courageous, it doesn't change who we are. We're not precious about. This is about the kingdom. It's about the souls that we want to see come into the church. We need bigger nets. We need bigger nets in every location for what God's about to do. And that's the new thing that he's doing. So get excited, guys. Get excited. I think some of you are a part of it that you don't even know you're a part of it yet. So come on, grab the side of the net. Get excited for this next season, because there's so much in store.
Come on. It is going to be an amazing next season. So, guys, that is an update for you. We are so pumped for what God is doing. We're full of vision. And I just ask each one of you guys who are listening to be praying for us, to be a part of it, to be lifting up our pastors as they step into it too. We'll be back next week with another episode. Thanks for joining us.